It was a gray Sunday afternoon in Washington. Rain tapped gently against the kitchen window as the smell of overcooked casserole filled the air. Emma sat at the head of the table, forcing a smile. Her chair creaked under her as she shifted slightly, trying to hide her discomfort. Around her, the room buzzed with polite chatter and the clinking of forks, until Margaret opened her mouth. "Don't you think you've had enough, Emma?" Margaret's voice cut through the room like a cold wind. "We're trying to raise a family here, not feed a farm." The silence was instant. Emma froze mid-bite. Her husband, Jason, looked down at his plate. He didn't say a word. No one did. They never did. Emma chuckled awkwardly and set her fork down. She didn't argue. She never argued. Margaret had never liked her. From the moment Jason introduced Emma as his fiancée, she saw her as a mistake. Too big, too soft, too ordinary. Margaret often reminded Emma that she wasn't what she pictured for her only son. And Emma, who had grown up just a few blocks away in the Rainier Valley, always tried to prove her wrong. But nothing was ever enough. Not the homemade dinners, not the spotless house, not even the fact that Emma worked 2 jobs to help with the mortgage. Margaret measured worth in appearance, status, and control. And in her eyes, Emma had none of those. The woman had spent her entire life obsessed with image. Her perfectly pressed blouses, her polished nails, her judgmental eyes that scanned Emma's frame like a scanner at a grocery checkout. At 248 pounds, Emma was used to stares, but the cruelty that came from inside her own family was harder to swallow than any public humiliation, especially when it came in whispers, in raised eyebrows, in forced diet books given as birthday gifts. Later that night, Jason climbed into bed next to her, silent as usual. Emma laid there in the dark, staring at the ceiling. The rain had stopped, but her mind was storming. She thought of the words Margaret had said, again and again, until her chest ached. "You didn't defend me," she finally whispered. Jason sighed. "Can we not do this tonight? I sit there while your mother humiliates me, and you act like I'm invisible." "She doesn't mean anything by it." Emma turned to face him. "Jason, I have value, I have worth, and you let her rip that away from me like it's nothing." Jason pulled the blanket over his head. The conversation was over. Just like always. That night, Emma cried quietly. Not because of what Margaret said, but because of what Jason didn't. And in that moment, something inside her broke. Or maybe, something finally woke up. She got out of bed and went to the bathroom. She stood in front of the mirror and looked at herself. Not just at her body, but into her eyes. Eyes that had been tired for too long. Eyes that carried years of trying to please everyone except herself. "I'm done," she whispered. She didn't mean done with life. She meant done being small in spirit, even if she was large in body. Done giving her power away. Done believing that money, prosperity, or beauty were things only other women were allowed to have. Done believing she couldn't change. Emma didn't know how yet. She didn't have a plan. But she had a decision. And sometimes, that's where all change begins. That very night, at 2:33 in the morning, she opened her laptop. She searched for women like her. Stories, journeys, real transformation. She wasn't looking for quick fixes. She was looking for strength, health, and a new life rooted in values she could be proud of. The screen glowed as she typed one word into the search bar. Freedom. She didn't know it yet, but that word would come to define the year ahead. And nothing, not Jason's silence, not Margaret's words, not the mirror's reflection, was going to stop her from becoming the woman she was always meant to be. Not just thinner, stronger, wiser, wealthier in every way that matters, and free. The next morning, Emma woke up before the sun. The streets of Washington were still wet, the sidewalks slick and shining under the orange glow of streetlights. She sat on the edge of the bed, listening to Jason snore softly. For a moment, she considered crawling back under the blanket, pretending like the night before hadn't happened, pretending like her heart hadn't cracked open. But she didn't. Instead, she got dressed. She pulled on the only pair of workout pants she owned, black, stretched thin at the thighs, and a faded hoodie with the words Mount Rainier High barely visible across the chest. Her old sneakers squeaked on the tile as she tiptoed out of the house, careful not to wake anyone. Outside, the air was cool and fresh, smelling faintly of pine and wet earth. Emma stood still for a moment. This was her city, her home. She'd been born here, raised here, and humiliated here. But something was different now. She wasn't waiting for permission anymore. She started to walk, not fast, not far, just around the block. Her knees ached, her breath came in short bursts, but she didn't stop. With each step, she pictured Margaret's face, the disgust, the judgment. Then she pictured something else, herself, walking into that same kitchen one day, head high, body strong, heart full. Wealthy not just in money, but in confidence, in health, in self-worth. By the time she got back home, her hoodie was damp with sweat, her legs burned. But she smiled. That was day one. The days that followed weren't glamorous. Emma didn't post pictures. She didn't make speeches. She didn't buy expensive supplements or pay for trendy programs. She downloaded a free calorie tracking app and started writing everything down. She switched soda for water, chips for carrots. She didn't chase weight loss. She chased power, control. She wanted her values to match her actions. Jason noticed, but said nothing, just like always. Margaret came over one evening that same week. She dropped a bag of groceries on the counter and laughed. Low-fat yogurt? Oh, Emma, diets never work for people like you. You know that, right? Emma didn't flinch. Thanks for the groceries, Margaret. That was all she said. But inside, her fire burned hotter. By the second week, Emma had lost 7 pounds. Not much, maybe, to someone else. But to her, it was proof. Her body was changing. Her mind already had. She signed up for a low-cost gym near Capitol Hill. The place smelled like rubber and sweat, and it was full of people half her size. Still, she showed up. Early mornings, late evenings. She didn't compare herself to anyone. She only tracked her own steps, her own breath, her own quiet wins. One night she bumped into an old friend from high school, Anna, thin, glowing, a mom of 2 now, with a perfect Instagram smile. Emma? Anna gasped. Oh my God, I haven't seen you in forever. Emma smiled, heart pounding. Yeah, it's been a while. They chatted a bit. Polite, surface level. Anna didn't ask about her marriage, or her weight, or her dreams. Just offered a fake compliment and left. But Emma didn't care. She wasn't chasing approval anymore. She was building her own version of wealth, physical strength, emotional prosperity, and spiritual richness. The kind no one could steal from her. Not even Margaret. By week 4, she was down 16 pounds. Clothes fit differently. Her skin glowed. She still had a long way to go, over 80 pounds ahead of her. But she no longer saw it as a punishment. It was an investment. In her health, in her freedom, in her future. One night, as she stood in the kitchen sipping green tea, Jason walked in. He looked her up and down for the first time in months. You've been doing something different? Emma turned to face him, calm and firm. Yeah, I've been choosing me. He blinked. Okay. That was it. No hug. no praise. But Emma didn't need it, not anymore. Because for the first time in years, she was living in alignment with her values. Not just surviving, but rising. Quietly, powerfully. She had stopped living for validation and started living for peace. And peace, she was learning, was the real kind of prosperity. By the time summer hit Washington, Emma had dropped 29 pounds. The change wasn't just in how her jeans fit. It was in how she walked. Back straight, chin up. Not fast, not loud, but steady. Like someone who no longer asked the world for permission. One afternoon in early July, she stood in front of the mirror, holding a tank top she hadn't worn in over 5 years. It still clung a bit at the sides, but it zipped. And she smiled. Not because she thought she looked perfect, but because she felt powerful. At dinner that evening, Margaret struck again, as usual. "I hope you're not skipping meals now, Emma. That's not healthy. Starving yourself doesn't make you valuable." Emma put her fork down, gently. "I'm not starving, Margaret. I'm choosing. There's a difference." Margaret blinked, startled by the calm in her voice. Jason glanced between them, then back at his plate. Cowardly silence, again. But this time Emma didn't care. She had stopped looking at Jason for strength. She had found it in herself. Later that night, as she wiped down the kitchen counters, Emma caught her reflection in the microwave door. Her face looked different. Not thinner, necessarily, though that was happening too, but calmer, lighter, like some invisible weight had been lifted. Not the pounds. The shame. She realized then. She'd been carrying weight that was never hers to begin with. Margaret's expectations, society's judgment, Jason's disappointment. Years of emotional baggage had clung to her like heavy coats. But she was finally peeling them off, one by one. In mid-August, she bought herself a new pair of shoes. Not on sale, not secondhand. Real running shoes. She had saved up some money from her part-time bookkeeping job and decided she didn't need anyone's approval to invest in her health. At the store, the cashier, a college-aged girl with curly red hair, smiled as she scanned the box. "Starting something new?" she asked. Emma smiled back. "No. Finishing what I should have started years ago." She walked out of that store feeling like a woman made of fire. By early September, she had lost 42 pounds. The difference was now visible. People at church started whispering. A coworker asked for her secret. Jason finally looked up from his phone during dinner. "You're changing," he said. "I am," Emma replied. "You think that's a good thing?" "I know it is." Jason didn't respond. He looked confused, maybe threatened, maybe even scared. But Emma no longer measured her success by his comfort. She had learned something vital. When you start living by your own values, people who benefit from your silence will call it rebellion. One morning, while folding laundry, Emma found an old birthday card from Jason. From years ago. Before the silence. Before the cold. It read, "To the woman who makes my life whole." She stared at the words, stunned. At one point, he had loved her like that. But somewhere along the way, she had started shrinking for him, hoping he'd notice. Instead, she disappeared in plain sight. Not anymore. Emma had made a list on her phone, not of pounds or calories, but of things she wanted to feel. Freedom, vitality, security, peace, prosperity, joy. She read it every morning like a prayer. She had learned that real wealth wasn't in how much money she had. It was in how deeply she could breathe, how proud she felt when she looked in the mirror, how honest she could be with herself. She still had a long road ahead. But this time, it didn't feel like punishment. It felt like coming home. And while Margaret still rolled her eyes, and Jason still hovered in his fog of indifference, Emma was no longer waiting for applause. Her life was no longer a stage for others. It was a path she was paving herself. Step by step, pound by pound, day by day, she was no longer fighting for acceptance. She was building her own kingdom of peace, of health, of real prosperity. By the time the leaves started to turn in Washington, Emma had shed 58 pounds. The change was no longer just noticeable. It was undeniable. Her cheeks had definition. Her walk carried purpose. Her clothes, once stretched and sagging, now hung loose with pride. But deeper than any visible change was something richer. Emma had begun to rebuild her self-worth, brick by brick. It was October 2nd, a Saturday morning when everything snapped. The family had gathered for brunch at Margaret's house. Eggs, bacon, cinnamon rolls, and the same cold tension that always hung in the air. Emma wore a simple dress, navy blue, with sleeves that hugged her arms softly. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't bold, but it was her first time in years wearing something that made her feel beautiful. Margaret looked her up and down with a tight-lipped smile. "Well, look at you," she said, buttering her toast. "You almost look like a different person. Maybe now Jason will pay attention again." The room froze. Emma stared at her plate. Her fingers trembled. Jason cleared his throat, but said nothing. Emma stood up. Calm. Still. But something inside her had shattered for the final time. She looked directly at Margaret. "I don't need your approval. I never did." Margaret blinked, caught off guard. Jason sat up straighter. Emma turned to him next. "And you? You let her talk to me like I was nothing for years. You said nothing while I cried myself to sleep. Do you know what that kind of silence does to someone?" Jason opened his mouth, but Emma held up her hand. "No more. You don't get to speak for me. You don't get to shrink me to fit your mother's idea of worth." And just like that, she walked out. The autumn wind hit her face as she stepped onto the porch, and it felt like freedom. That night, she didn't go home. She booked a cheap hotel room by the waterfront using her own money, cash she'd quietly saved from side gigs and meal prepping for neighbors. She sat by the window and stared out at the gray waters of Elliott Bay, letting the quiet wrap around her like a soft blanket. She wasn't crying. She was thinking about the years she'd spent measuring her value in someone else's eyes, about all the dinners where she'd swallowed her words just to keep the peace, about how peace built on silence wasn't peace at all. That night, for the first time in forever, she slept soundly. The next morning, she opened her laptop and began researching coaching programs. She wanted to help other women like her, women who had been told they weren't enough, women crushed under expectations and shame. She didn't want to be a weight loss influencer. She wanted to talk about values, about health, about self-worth and prosperity of the heart. Over the next few weeks, she committed harder than ever before. She meal prepped with care, stayed consistent with her workouts, and even started journaling her thoughts, online. Not for fame, for freedom. She began to attract messages, women who said, "I see myself in you," women who said, "I needed to hear this today." And slowly, a community began to form. Her body was changing, yes, but more than that, her life was. She picked up an extra bookkeeping job from home. With the added money, she invested in a course on coaching and mindset training. She didn't ask Jason's opinion. She didn't need his permission. Her prosperity was hers to build now. By November 11th, she had lost 71 pounds. She didn't flaunt it. But she didn't hide it either. She simply lived, truthfully, proudly, and without apology. And every step forward brought her closer to a life she was creating on her own terms. Emma didn't need revenge. She needed restoration. But she didn't know yet, not fully, that the most poetic revenge was coming anyway. And it would be served quietly, with grace and power. It was the morning of December 3rd when Emma stepped into her old church on Pine Street. The air smelled like cinnamon and pine needles, and the choir was humming softly in the background. For the first time in years, she didn't sit in the back row. She walked straight to the middle pew, shoulders back, chin lifted, presence undeniable. Heads turned. Gasps weren't loud, but they were real. She wasn't the same woman who used to hide behind oversized cardigans and lowered eyes. Emma had now lost 80 pounds. And it wasn't just the weight, it was the energy. Her glow wasn't from a product. It came from peace, from values lived out in action, from hard-earned health, from knowing she had rebuilt her life brick by brick, dollar by dollar, day by day. After service, an old friend named Carla approached her, holding a cup of hot coffee in her gloved hands. "Emma?" she said, stunned. "You look incredible. I mean, what happened?" Emma smiled gently. "I started choosing myself." The words hung in the air like snowflakes, delicate, inevitable. That night she posted a photo. Just one, a simple one. Her in jeans, standing near the Christmas lights on Alki Beach. No filters, no hashtags. Just a caption that read, "This year, I didn't just lose pounds. I gained strength, I gained peace, I gained back me." In 24 hours, the post had over 800 likes and dozens of messages. Some were from strangers. Others were from people she hadn't heard from in years. Classmates, cousins, even a girl who used to whisper behind her back at school. But one message stood out. Jason. He had seen the photo. He wrote, "You look amazing. We should talk." Emma stared at the message for a long time. She didn't reply. Not yet. Instead, she focused on her next steps. She'd completed her online coaching certification and was preparing to launch her own website. Whole Within, a wellness space not focused on weight loss alone, but on emotional health, prosperity, and real transformation. She designed it from scratch, wrote every word herself, took photos in the city she'd once tried to disappear in. Washington wasn't just her hometown. It was her proving ground. By mid-December, she had picked up her first 2 clients, both women over 40, both struggling with self-worth and emotional eating. Emma didn't sell quick fixes. She offered real talk, deep work, gentle structure. Her income started to rise, small at first, but steady. Real. With the extra money, she upgraded her workspace. A new desk, a better chair, a second-hand ring light. She was building a business based on truth and healing. She didn't need to be a millionaire. She needed to be free. Meanwhile, Jason kept texting. His tone had shifted. "I miss you. We had good times, didn't we? You've changed so much. I didn't realize how amazing you were." And then, one night, December 21st at 9:34 p.m., he sent the message that made her sit still for a long, long moment. "I made a mistake. I didn't treat you right. If I could go back, I would do it all different. Would you ever consider starting over?" Emma stared at the words, not with anger, not with tears, with clarity. She typed, slowly, carefully. "I didn't go through all this to go back to the woman who begged to be seen. I wish you well, Jason. But I found something better than your love. I found self-respect." She hit send. Then she exhaled. That moment wasn't about revenge. It was about release. She wasn't the same woman who once cried into her pillow while Jason turned away. She was standing in her own life now, on her own 2 feet, with values stronger than opinions and a future brighter than apologies. Emma had now lost 98 pounds. But what she'd gained, that was the real wealth. The new year rolled in cold and wet, typical of January in Washington. On the first morning of 2022, Emma woke up before sunrise. She brewed her own coffee, dark and strong, and sat by the window in silence, wrapped in a gray sweater. No resolutions, no big declarations, just peace. She had now lost 98 pounds. But the number wasn't the headline anymore. It was how she felt inside her body, the way her knees no longer ached when she stood, the way she walked into rooms without shrinking, the way her laugh filled the air without shame. She was healthy, whole, and finally free. Her coaching business, Whole Within, was gaining momentum. 3 new clients had signed up in the past week alone. Women who didn't want just a diet plan. They wanted a new mindset. They wanted someone who understood what it felt like to be invisible and unwanted, then rise anyway. Emma knew the feeling too well. And now, she was turning that pain into purpose. On January 8th, she was invited to speak at a local women's wellness event at a community center in West Seattle. Not fancy, not high budget. But it mattered. She stood in front of a small group of women, some young, some older, all carrying invisible weight. She told them her story, about growing up heavy, about being humiliated by her mother-in-law, Margaret, about years of begging for attention, chasing love, giving more than she ever received, and about the night she decided to change, not for a man, but for herself. The room was silent as she spoke. Some women cried. Others nodded along like they'd been waiting their whole lives to hear someone put their story into words. Afterward, a woman approached her in tears. "I haven't worn a dress in 10 years, she whispered, "but next Sunday I'm gonna try, because of you." Emma hugged her gently. "That's not because of me," she said. "That's because you remembered who you are." Emma left that room feeling richer than she ever had. Not in money, though her income was finally rising, but in meaning, in connection, in purpose. That's the kind of wealth no one can take away. And then it happened. A text from Margaret. "Can we talk?" At first, Emma almost ignored it, but something inside her said, "Let her speak. Let her see who you've become." They met for coffee at a quiet place near Green Lake on January 14th, around 3:15 p.m. Margaret arrived wearing her usual pearls, her coat too neat, her eyes scanning Emma like a stranger. "I've been following what you're doing online," she began. "You look very different." Emma stirred her coffee, calm and unbothered. "I am different." Margaret looked uncomfortable. "I might have been too harsh over the years. I didn't see things clearly back then." Emma tilted her head. She waited. She wasn't going to make it easy. Margaret exhaled, the weight of pride heavy on her shoulders. "I was wrong about you." Emma smiled, small but firm. "You weren't just wrong. You were cruel. You judged me by my body. You treated me like a burden. And you taught your son to do the same." Margaret looked down at her cup. For once, she didn't defend herself. "I'm sorry," she said. And maybe for the first time, she meant it. But Emma didn't need an apology. Not really. She had already forgiven her. Not for Margaret's sake, but for her own freedom. They parted ways after 35 minutes. No hugs, no promises, just closure. Later that night, Jason texted again. "My mom told me you met. She said you looked amazing. I can't stop thinking about you, Emma. Would you ever give us a second chance?" Emma didn't respond right away. She stared at the message, feeling nothing but quiet power. She wasn't bitter. She wasn't angry. She was simply beyond him now. When she finally replied, it was short. "I've already started my second chance, without you." She turned off her phone, poured herself a cup of herbal tea, and smiled. Let them watch. Let them all watch. Because Emma was no longer the woman they underestimated. She was the woman they now envied. And the best part? She'd built it all herself, out of pain, out of truth, out of fire. By February 3rd, the air in Washington was sharp and cold, but Emma's heart had never been warmer. Her business had doubled in size since January. She had 15 private clients now, a waiting list stretching into April, and her first group coaching session sold out in less than 24 hours. Emma was no longer just surviving. She was thriving. She rented a small studio space downtown, bright, with exposed brick, wood floors, and big windows that let the afternoon sun pour in. It wasn't flashy, but it was hers, paid for with her own money, earned by her own hands, and every square inch of it was a symbol of her independence, her health, her new prosperity. The space became her sanctuary, a place where other women came to talk, to cry, to heal. Emma didn't just teach them about nutrition or exercise. She taught them about values, about how wealth wasn't just in your bank account, but in how much peace you had when you laid your head down at night. About how real health wasn't just physical, but emotional too. Then came the email from Jason. Emma, Mom and I are planning a little get-together. Just family. Nothing fancy. She wants to formally apologize. I'd like you to come. I know you don't owe us anything. But it would mean a lot. Emma stared at the screen for a long time. A year ago, that message would have broken her, would have pulled her back into old patterns of pleasing, of hoping, of aching for scraps of approval. But now, she didn't need to go. She chose to. Not for them, for herself. She replied, I'll be there. Don't expect the old Emma. She's not coming. The dinner was scheduled for Saturday, February 12th at 6 o'clock sharp. Emma wore a sleek black dress, simple, fitted, with a gold necklace that once belonged to her grandmother. Her makeup was soft, her smile confident. 98 pounds lighter and 1,000 times stronger. When she walked into Margaret's house, the room went quiet. Even Margaret froze, her fork halfway to her mouth. Jason stood up too quickly. Wow, you look, Emma raised a hand gently. I didn't come for compliments. I came to hear what needed to be said. Margaret cleared her throat. Her voice shook just slightly. Emma, I know I was harsh, for years. I judged you by your size. I made assumptions about your worth, your discipline, your values. I see now how wrong that was. Emma didn't speak. Not yet. I saw the money you raised for that women's shelter downtown, Margaret continued. I saw the interviews, the website. You've built something remarkable. I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner. Emma looked her in the eyes. I didn't do it to be seen. I did it because I was tired of begging for worth. Jason chimed in. I should have stood up for you. I was weak. I didn't know how to handle things. Emma nodded slowly. You knew how. You just chose not to. The room was heavy with truth. No one rushed to fill the silence. Margaret's eyes welled up. I know I can't undo what I said, but I am proud of you. Emma offered a polite smile. Thank you. I accept the apology, but I don't need your pride to validate who I am. After dinner, Jason followed her outside. The wind was soft, brushing against her shoulders like a whisper. I miss you, he said. Everything about you. Emma looked at him, steady and clear. You miss the woman I became, but you didn't love her while she was becoming. Jason took a breath. I know, I was a fool. Emma nodded. I don't need you to regret me, Jason. I need you to remember that I rose without you, that I built this life with my own hands. He reached for her hand, She stepped back. "I wish you well," she said, "but I'm not your second chance. I'm my own first choice." She walked away, not out of anger, out of wisdom, because some people only value what they lose. And Emma? She wasn't something to be lost. She was the kind of woman you earn. Spring came early that year. By March 19th, the cherry blossoms outside Emma's studio were already blooming, soft pink petals dancing in the breeze like little promises. Washington felt brighter, lighter. Or maybe it was Emma who'd changed the most. Exactly 1 year had passed since the night she stood in her bathroom and whispered, "I'm done." She was now 100 pounds lighter than that night. But more than that, she was richer in every way that counted. Her body, yes, stronger, leaner. But her spirit, unshakable. Her health, glowing. Her values, intact. Her soul, free. Her business, whole within, was no longer small. She had expanded to 2 new cities, hired her first assistant, and launched an online course that reached over 400 women in its first month. Emma wasn't just coaching women, she was helping them transform their entire lives. The money started to grow too, but she never flaunted it. She still lived in the same cozy apartment on the South End, still drove her 10-year-old car, still made her own coffee every morning. But now, she gave back. 10% of her monthly revenue went to a fund she created for single mothers needing therapy or health coaching. That was the kind of prosperity she cared about. Impact, not image. Then came the letter. It arrived in a simple white envelope, hand-delivered to her studio. From Jason. Inside was no card, no flowers, just a letter, neatly written in black ink. "Emma, I know you don't owe me a reply. You don't owe me anything at all, but I needed to say this. I watched you rise. I watched you become everything I couldn't see when I had you. I was small, weak, afraid. And you were right, I didn't protect you. I let my mother hurt you. I let silence be my voice. And by the time I realized what I'd lost, it was too late. I see you now. Not just the weight loss, the strength, the presence, the grace. You didn't just change, you elevated. And I am ashamed I didn't cherish you when you loved me most. I hope you find a love that matches your fire. I hope you keep building that beautiful life. I'll always regret how I treated you. But I'll never stop being proud of the woman you are." Jason Emma folded the letter quietly and placed it in a drawer. Not out of bitterness, out of peace. She had no hatred left in her heart, only memory. And memory didn't have to be a wound. It could be a reminder of what she survived, of what she rebuilt, of who she became. That night, she hosted a small event at her studio. Just 20 women. They sat in a circle, candles flickering, voices raw and real. Emma shared her final lesson. "I used to think weight held me back," she said. "But it wasn't pounds, it was fear. Fear of not being enough. Fear of being too much. Fear of losing love if I ever chose myself." She paused. "But now? I know my worth. I live by my values, and I define my own wealth." A woman in the back raised her hand. "What would you say to the old version of you, Emma?" Emma smiled. "I'd say, you didn't disappear, you transformed." The clock struck 9:32 p.m. Emma walked out onto the sidewalk, the city alive around her, lights glowing, people laughing, wind brushing against her skin. She wasn't waiting to be chosen anymore. She was the choice. And her story of pain, of transformation, of poetic redemption was just beginning. So if you're listening, and you've ever felt invisible, if you've ever been mocked, silenced, underestimated, let Emma's story be the proof. You are not broken, you are becoming. And you too are worthy of wealth, of health, of peace, and of love that sees you completely. And you? Have you ever lived through something like this? Comment down below. I'd love to hear your story.